But more broadly, it's also defined as a person engaged in some struggle or conflict. And so you can be a warrior in everyday life. You can be a warrior in your job, and you can be a warrior in your personal life. It doesn't mean that you're engaged in warfare, right? It just means that you're managing conflict and that you're involved in some struggle, which we all are, especially if you have kids. I mean, you know that.
Welcome to the Badass Dad podcast, where we are a band of brothers committed to forging stronger fathers. Hey, thanks so much for listening to this episode. This is being brought to you by the generous donations of the people who have made contributions at our website, which is BadAssDads.org, BadAssDads.org. You can also find some promotional shirts and other ways to support the podcast as well. But I just want to thank you guys so much for your support. Enjoy this episode. Welcome to the Badass Dad podcast. KDH here on the microphone in the Iron Yeti studios once again on another, July has turned out to be hot. And I am super excited to be sitting across the table from Professor Chris Jones. Chris, how you feeling?
Good.
Yeah.
Good to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited. I mean, we've been talking about getting on the microphone. You've heard other people,
Right.
And I've always enjoyed conversations that we've had because we've had them on multiple different levels, and you are incredibly well read. You are a student of life and of the game of Jiu-Jitsu, and who knows? We'll talk about law enforcement. We'll talk about being a warrior as well. But I just really appreciate the different angle that you bring, to our conversations as well. So I'm looking forward to this. But let's start off. Just let people know a little about little Chris Jones growing up here in the Denver metro area, and tell us. I mean, you grew up here.
I did, yeah. Born and raised Southwest Denver.
Yeah, and then went to high school here, and then talk to me. Growing up, athletic kid, wrestler.
Yeah, actually, growing up, I played a lot of different sports, none of them extremely well.
Okay.
But my parents had me engaged in things year round. So summertime, I was on the swim team, dive team, playing baseball, played fall baseball, wrestled in the wintertime, played soccer spring and fall. So lot of different athletics.
So was that mostly just to keep you off the streets, or what was it?
Yeah, probably. Yeah. So I had a kind of an interesting upbringing. So my dad was a Denver public school teacher for 32 years.
Wow.
My mom was in law enforcement for 30 plus years.
And that's an interesting combination. I mean, because it's almost like those are reversed from what a lot of people would think the traditional roles, husband and wife, mom and dad would play. So, wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I used to tell people I couldn't get away with anything as a kid, because my parents would always tell me, if we haven't done it, we've seen it done. And you're not going to pull one over on us. So.
Yeah. They're going to know all the tells that you're going to be showing before.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's hilarious. That's so good. What kind of role did your mom play? What did she do? Was she
So
on the streets, or?
she was on the streets for a long time.
Okay.
Moved up through the ranks. She was a sergeant for many years, worked in internal affairs, doing internal investigations. Then she went on to become a command officer, and she was in charge of a police district for several years. And then she was the director of training at the academy when she retired.
Wow.
So a lot of different experience.
Yeah. So you finish high school. What do you do next? You just jump right into law enforcement, go to school? What do you do?
No, actually. So that's kind of an interesting pathway, how I ended up there. Senior year of high school, I started kind of taking an interest in emergency medicine. Okay. And I thought I wanted to become an EMT and eventually go to paramedic school. So I started reading up on it, and I graduated high school and enrolled myself in a EMT program over the summer. Went to school, got my EMT basic certification, and then I volunteered for an ambulance company and got my IV certification through them. And I started volunteering on the weekends, working 24-hour shifts with an emergency ambulance in South Adams County. And at the same time, in that fall, I registered for college at CU Denver, and I applied for the Denver Public Safety Cadet Program, and I was placed on a waiting list that first year. So I was just going to school and working on the ambulance, and the following year I applied again, and I was accepted into the program. And it's a great program. They give you a job, they pay for your tuition and books, and you get to learn and get experience in all the different fields of first responders. So you work with the sheriff's department, you sit in on some court trials, you do ride-alongs with the fire department, with the police department, and every school semester they rotate you to a different assignment. And once I got into the program, my intention was to join the fire department. And I
as Justin said, you made poor life choices.
right. Yeah. So I started doing ride-alongs with both, and never had any intention of going to law enforcement. I grew up in a law enforcement family, and I remember just seeing things, growing up. I remember there was times when my mom worked the graveyard shift for a long time.
Wow.
Because it worked out for childcare, because she'd work at night.
Makes sense.
She'd get home, sleep for a little bit, and then she'd watch me, and my dad was working during the day.
Right. And
I remember growing up, there were times when, like, I'd just be so scared that my mom was going to work.
Yeah.
And I don't know, it just kind of stuck with me, but I never thought about going into law enforcement. I knew that I felt a calling to be some sort of a first responder, but never, for whatever reason, never considered that.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I think that's what drew me towards the medicine side. And I started doing ride-alongs, and man, the police ride-alongs, it just had a blast. And I started looking at it from the aspect of, on the fire department, great job, commendable profession, but you're very much tied to the radio, right? Mm-hmm. And if the tone drops, you go. But if it doesn't, then you're finding work to do around the firehouse. The police side, I started to see that you could be a very, very proactive, productive officer. You could be as busy as you wanted to be, right? When there's calls coming out, obviously that's your priority. But when it's slow, you can go out and conduct enforcement efforts, right? You can go patrol neighborhoods. You can look for bad guys, and you can find things to do. Mm-hmm. And that just really intrigued me. And I think the other thing was just the level of freedom, from the sense of you see your boss for half an hour, 15 minutes, half an hour at the beginning of your shift, and then you go load up your car, and you're out in your little section of the city, and you're in your car, your mobile office, and like you're in control, and you're doing the job, and you have an incredible amount of freedom to kind of direct your efforts to what your interests are. If you like doing traffic stops, you go do traffic stops. If you like working street crimes or vice type stuff, then you can start making contacts and gathering information and learning about that side of police work, right? And there's a lot of different avenues. And the other thing is, I just saw that there was a lot of opportunity with law enforcement, because there's so many directions you can go. You can go to investigations, you can go to the tactical units, you can go to the gang unit. On the fire side, there's a lot of specialties, but it seemed like you're kind of limited to where you could go or what you could do. If you were unhappy with, one firehouse, you could go to another firehouse, but you weren't really going in a different direction or doing something that was unique. Like you're just it seemed like it was more of a change of scenery and not a change of actual job responsibilities. And it just seemed like that the law enforcement side just had a lot to offer. So I started giving it some pretty serious consideration, and I remember, this is going to sound funny, but one of the things that kind of solidified my decision was I was on a ride along one night, and the officer I was with made a traffic stop on a stolen vehicle. And I remember it was a Jeep Grand Cherokee. We were up in the area of kind of Globeville area, and driver pulls over, and the officer gets him in custody, walks him back to the car, sits him in the car, and he's, starting to order a tow truck, and a cover car is on their way to help us out. And I remember gunshots start going off over the car, right? And we got ambushed by a guy who was shooting at us with a 7.62 rifle.
Wait, and this is just a
from
ride
the bridge.
along.
Yeah, just a ride along.
So you're not even badged up
I'm
yet.
a college kid. I'm unarmed, and I'm sitting in the passenger seat, getting as tiny as I can get. Right.
Yeah.
And
I'm just thinking about the ride along I did with Reed Perry, and just going, I don't know what I would have done. Like, holy shit! Like,
right.
This got real right now. So okay.
Right. And so and I remember we're just hearing the crack and the whiz of the bullets going over the top of the police car, and we don't even know where it's coming from.
Right.
And so the officer I'm with he did a great job. He's, he calls it out, and he gets out of the car, and he's looking, trying to find out where the threat is. And it was coming from a car like on a bridge nearby. And the suspect jumped back in the car and took off, and our cover got there. Nobody was hurt. Found some impacts on, a light pole and a sign and stuff. They found some shell casings up in the grass, but to this day, I don't think anybody was ever identified. Nothing. I mean, it was just it was a completely random ambush style attack, right?
Okay.
Luckily we were okay. And I got home that morning, and I remember thinking, like, I'm sold, like, and
I'm in. Like, bullets whizzing over my head. I'm in.
Right. And it sounds crazy.
Yes, it does.
And I don't know why, I don't know why that thought came into my head. But that's when I decided that I was going to go law enforcement.
Wow.
So, yeah.
So you get into the academy. How old are you then?
21.
21 years old.
Yeah.
You enter the academy.
Yep.
I mean, you are just green as can be then. I mean.
Yeah. So I actually left college between my junior and senior year to join the police department.
Okay.
And I was 21 years old, young kid. I turned 22 halfway through the academy.
Wow.
So yeah, it was.
That's crazy. What does your mom say?
It's funny because she wasn't surprised. She wasn't real happy that I got shot at, and that's what made up my mind. But I don't think she ever saw me going to the fire department. I think she was going to support whatever I decided, but she wasn't going to influence the decision, and she was going to let me make the decision. So
through all this, now you grew up wrestling, so there's a little bit of a natural transition into jiu-jitsu, but it sounds like there's a little bit of time period between there before you jump into martial arts.
It was a couple years.
Okay. Because here's why I want to eventually get to this question, because I know you turned me on to the Invictus podcast, LEO, and so they were interviewing a couple of different black belts were on there, and they're also in law enforcement, and I was shocked at, like, one was, I don't remember, they had, like, I don't know, 300 officers, and he said, like, yeah, we may have 5.
Yeah.
And I thought the number would be much, much higher than, 1%, or 2%. Right. I was like shocked. So anyway, my question to you is, like, when did you get started in jiu-jitsu and in martial arts overall? You had your background in wrestling. What kind of got you in that direction as well?
So after the academy, I was assigned to a pretty busy district. There's a lot of violent crime. I was working graveyards. I was getting into a lot of trouble. Foot chases and some resistances and stuff like that. And it was about 2006. I'd done a brief stint with a power shift working 2-officer car, and then I was selected to go to a proactive street crimes unit. And that was even more crazy because it was all proactive, self-initiated law enforcement side. So you're really not handling calls unless it's something really, really big. But you didn't have an area of town that was your responsibility to address the calls for service. You were assigned an area of town that it was your job to go out and do a directed enforcement efforts for whatever the the problem was in the neighborhood. It could be property crimes. It could be prostitution, gang activity. If there was a rash of auto thefts, then we'd go, try to address that and look for patterns of crimes. And you get, weekly reports and monthly reports of kind of where the hot spots are. And that's where we were sent to go and address the issues that are plaguing the community. And a lot of it was dealing with a lot of quality of life issues too, like dealing with graffiti and, drinking in public and, like I said, prostitution and stuff like that. That was just kind of having a negative impact on the neighborhood overall.
Mm-hmm.
And so in that type of a setting, you get into even more of the, stolen cars and dealing with gang members and violent crimes and people with guns. And you're getting a lot of foot chases and so you're getting a lot of resistances because when people run, you represent a hindrance to their freedom, right? And so if somebody is intent on keeping their freedom, then sometimes they'll do anything to try to ensure that, right? They'll run. If they get caught, they'll fight you. It's I never took it lightly because I understand it. That it's not personal. It's that's a major request for somebody in our position to make of a complete stranger is to say, I'm here to restrain you and take you to jail and take away your freedom.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And that's not an easy pill to swallow for a lot of people.
Right.
That's a big request. And and you have no social capital that you've paid in to make a deposit or to make a withdrawal like that.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
So it's being involved in a lot of that stuff. I started to see that there was a void in my training,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I'd been in some altercations where the thought actually came into my mind during the encounter of like, this is not going well. Like,
Right.
This is not how I saw this going down. And, when you're in a dark alley in a busy city and you're encountering somebody who desperately wants to keep their freedom,
Mm-hmm.
and they're willing to fight you for it, and that thought comes into your head, that's a scary place to be.
Yeah.
And I decided that I needed to seek out training on my own, right? Because there was a void there, and I knew I had to do something about it. So I started looking around, and this is around the time the Ultimate Fighter series was picking up, and the UFC was getting really popular. And so Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu was getting a lot more publicity and a lot more attention. And it was growing in just the exposure and the knowledge about it. And I looked at that and I thought, that's what I need, right? I need something that allows me to deal with unarmed subjects who are combative, and something that is scalable to all levels of resistance, right? Because they give us a little bit of striking in the academy. It's primarily based on Krav Maga, but you don't get a lot. I think you get about 80 hours of striking, but all of that is hitting bags and kicking pads, and you're not fighting an opponent. You're not sparring anybody that's fighting back.
Right.
And I think that kind of gives you a false sense of confidence in your abilities. And on the street in law enforcement, we're not going to strike somebody unless they're exhibiting active aggression, right? If they're just trying to get away from you, it's defensive resistance. It's not to the level where we can punch them in the face or knee them in the head. And it's certainly, if somebody's just turtled up and not giving up their hands, we're not gonna strike them for that either. So I needed something that I could apply to all those levels of resistance. I could scale up and down as needed.
Yeah.
And really tailor fit it to to the level of resistance. And so I remember pulling out a phone book, that's, and, Yellow Pages, and looking up, the martial arts section and scrolling through looking for Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu.
Okay.
Right? And I found a school in there that there was an address that wasn't too far away. And I thought, well, this would be perfect. It's kind of right in the middle of the city. It's, I could go there before or after work or on my days off. Like it's going to be a perfect place to train. So I remember I called the number and I talked to a coach on the phone, and he was at the affiliate school in Boulder. And I remember him telling me that, that location isn't actually open yet. It's in the works, but it's not up and running yet, but you can come up to Boulder and do an intro class and see if you like it. So, so one day I was on days off or whatever, and I got my Jeep, I drove up to Boulder, and I said, hey, I'm here for an introductory lesson. And so I did the intro class, and I'm like, man, I'm sold. So I remember I signed up, I bought a gi and wrote a check, and I was just waiting until the school opened, right? And the day that it opened, I showed up there not knowing anything, right? And putting on my gi, having somebody help me tie the belt, and stepping on the mats, and it was nothing but colored belts.
Right. Right.
Blue, purple, brown, black belts. I was like, man, this is what I get into.
Yeah.
And but that's where it started. And I started training there, and yeah.
And here you are, just last June, got your black belt.
November of 18.
November of 18. Oh,
yeah.
Okay. I thought we did it at the last Master Miguel, but it was the Grandmaster Miguel. It was the one before.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
So
it
really
before,
coming up on 2 years now.
Yeah.
Being a black belt. And so how has your mindset shifted? Because when we met, and I'll tell a little of that story, what I remember of it, you can correct me where I am inaccurate, but you were a purple belt when we met.
Right.
Which really, because of the nature of how we were training and everything else, and not really having an academy and all that, probably we're much beyond where you were, but to now being a black belt, what's like the difference,
Man, it's a huge difference. I remember, when I got my black belt, it was a total surprise. Very, very humbling experience. But it's one of the, like, you never feel like you're ready. And even now, it's like you feel like you have so much left to, still to learn that it's, you question some days whether it's deserved or not, some days more than other, but that's every belt. I think.
I was going to say, I feel the exact same way.
It's like they say that there's some belts that are overdue and some that you grow into. And I think the black belt, you're always growing into it.
Oh, that's a good way of putting that. I like that a lot. I mean, it's, the experience that I've had. Okay. So we meet, 3-4 years ago, and, my first experience down in, Justin's basement.
Uh-huh.
And, the day I remember very, very, very vividly, the very first day that I show up, because I remember for my work, I'm on a conference call, so I'm running behind, and I'm texting Justin. Justin's so gracious, as he always is, and he goes, "Don't worry about it. I've been to his house, so come on down, go downstairs." And so I finally, so first of all, I'm nervous going, because I know Justin, but I don't know anybody else. And I know he trains with killers, and he trains killers, and I'm late. So I've just got all this working against me, and the anxiety is, ramping up, and I'm on a conference call I don't even want to be on anyway. So I remember coming down Justin's stairs, and, you got to come downstairs, and you got to almost make like a hard turn to be able to get to where the mats are. And I remember walking in there, and I don't know if this is actually the way it was or just the way I've hallucinated that it was, but I just remember seeing handguns laying out. I mean, you're all officers, and I'm just like, and Devin sees me with this deer in the headlights look, and I'm just like, and I remember Devin goes, "This is the safest place in all of Colorado right now." I was like, okay. So you fast forward, and we start training. We have the other location where we train for quite a bit, and had to carry the mats out and set them up and everything. And because we're a similar stature, we got paired up a lot. And I just remember early on, I'm as white as a white belt could be. And I remember like, because we trained judo first.
Right.
Okay. We every fight starts standing. So we always started standing. And I remember, and I'm a decade and a half older than you. And I remember leaving hurting, like going, what the hell am I doing? Why am I coming back to this? And I was like, I don't know if Chris is just a dick or what, but it was so good. You were the perfect, I mean, you're like, I mean, yeah, I got to train with Justin, but I mean, really, you taught me so much and you coached me so much and still do to this day. But I valued it so much. And so I just remember leaving and go, oh my gosh, do I have to train with Chris again today? Because he's just, in learning to fall and all that stuff. And so,
it's rough, man.
I just have to go back and wonder. Cause I mean, when I first started training with you guys, I wish I had stepped on the scale right before, but shortly before that, I weighed north of 250 pounds.
Right.
And so I'd lost over 40, probably 50 pounds during that time period, and put a little back on, but, it's COVID weight is what it is. But a lot of it I just attribute to just the guys and gals that we were training with and the consistency and all of that as well. So I just wonder, because there aren't many people that Justin lets come into that group, especially at that time, because it was a different environment. It wasn't traditional academy. But when you see this older white belt walk in, are you just like rolling your eyes going, what is Justin doing? Like, give me the real deal. Tell the real story now, if you recall any of it.
No, I mean, we were always looking for good training partners, and people were, because of our
Punching
schedules.
bags.
Yeah. Well, our schedules are so crazy that it was hard to find a time when you could get a big group together. So sometimes, there's only a couple guys training, and, we were always looking to kind of expand that group, the original pit. And so that there was always, plenty of people on standby that could fill in. But it's just like with any new white belt that comes in, there's a process of trying to kind of temper it and, get them to kind of relax a little bit,
chill out,
because everybody thinks that, coming in that the higher belts are just going to try to kill them. And there's a tendency, I think, that especially when you first start to roll live, and randori and stuff, it's always the white belts that spaz out, that get really aggressive and they, start hyperventilating or, and they just come at you at 100 every time. And it's like, bro, this is a gentle art. You got to pace yourself. It's about technique and moving yourself around your opponent and looking for those openings. It's not, it's not that, trying to muscle everything. And so that's always hard,
Yeah.
And there's some people that take to it very quickly and understand that. And there's some that, man, like it's just, you can never drive that point home. And unfortunately they don't last very long because they get frustrated and people get frustrated with them. And there's a high turnover at that white belt level and even at blue belt.
Yeah.
And I think part of that is, one, it is you have to have a great deal of self-awareness and self-assessment, and building on those emotional intelligence components and looking at being aware of what's going on and aware of your body and your emotions, and then being able to check that and manage yourself, right? Because if you can't do those two things, then you're never going to get into the social aspects of that social awareness and relationship management. And that's huge in life. And I think that's what jiu-jitsu does such a good job of teaching, is it's not just the self-defense skills. It's not just the discipline and the ability on the mat, but it carries over to so many other aspects in life, into business and relationships and, just your professionalism overall. And it really does a good job of teaching that emotional intelligence quotient. It does it a lot through just, hammering it in, but,
right.
But I think it does a good job.
Well, I'll tell you, one of the things that I remember you taught me, and you probably just whispered it in my ear a couple hundred times, was, listen, as a white belt, you get to determine how hard we're going to go.
Right.
Okay. Right. If because at some point, whatever belt you are, you're going to have to defend. You may have a ton more skills, but if they're just coming at you like a, rabid dog, I mean, you have to defend yourself. But just learning that, so yeah, push it, but understand that one of the things that I've loved about jiu-jitsu is, as I've, I don't know, hopefully grown a little bit or something like that, is I can train with you. We're similar size, over 200 pounds, over 6 feet tall. But we can also train with Mandy, who's 5 foot nothing,
right.
Weighs whatever. And she's a rabid dog all the time, or Teresa, who's
right.
But we can roll with females and no one has to get hurt.
Right.
It's not like in striking, like, you got to pull your punches or anything like that if you're going to be with someone, because there's such an advantage there. But here, we can train. I can train with my kids. I can train with my 9-year-old as well. So tons of benefits. One thing I'd love to hear, your thought, because you said, moving yourself around your opponent. I wonder just in life, like how we could use that concept, moving ourselves around our opponent, or, and how we would apply that to, say, being a dad or being a better husband or something like that. What are some ways that we can take this concept and go, man, here's how I can be better with my kids. I mean, you got a couple little kids at home, and so you know what that's like as well. But just that concept, moving ourselves around they're not our opponent.
Yeah.
Sometimes they feel like they could be.
Well, it's maneuvering your way through and around problems in general. People make the comparison a lot that jiu-jitsu is like playing chess. It's physical and mental chess game. And it's so true, because the more you learn about jiu-jitsu, and the more you progress and the more you roll, especially when you go against somebody who is also very incredibly skilled, it becomes a battle of inches. It becomes a series of just micro victories. And it's all about not just responding to an action and reacting and this back and forth. I think in the realm of martial arts, I was going to bring this up also, that, like I mentioned, that they taught us Krav Maga in the academy, and it's good. It's good for beginners. It's good for people who don't have any sort of skill set. It can give you some level of ability to defend yourself. It gives you, teaches you some striking, but you're always going to be limited by size and strength and timing and range, and there's a lot of limitations there. And especially if you're not sparring and you don't learn those limitations, and when you do have to use it, then there's a steep learning curve. And I would kind of compare that to like the arcade game of whack-a-mole, right?
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
It's you can get lucky, right? You can have people of all different sizes and strength, and they can play the game and they can get lucky and they can score points. But you start looking at jiu-jitsu, and it's so much more involved, and it's so much more centered around strategy and thinking, not just responding to or reacting to whatever's right in front of you, but thinking 3-4 moves ahead, thinking I'm going to do this because I know that my opponent will react this way.
Yep. And
that will set up this other move that I know they'll then have to counter, and they'll give up the move I actually want.
Right.
Right. And that's how you manage conflict in relationships, and that's how you manage things with your kids too, is you don't just react and respond. You have to strategize, right? You have to think, well, if I do this, I know that my kid is going to react in a certain way. Or if I snap back at my wife, I know that she's going to respond in a specific way.
Yeah.
Right. And if I don't want that reaction, then I need to find a way to maneuver around it. Right. I need to maneuver myself. I need to flank it, and I need to strategize my approach.
Yeah.
And that's what that emotional intelligence is all about too, is when we're looking at the relationship management, you have to know how things make you react emotionally, but then you have to check that long enough for your rational brain to kick in, and you use the balance of the two. You don't completely neglect the emotional response, because there's a reason why that happens, right? There's a reason why you get that visceral reaction. So you have to take that into consideration and use that to help influence your decision. But if you act only on emotion, then you're making irrational decisions, and you're going to have a poor outcome. If you act only on rational thought and you completely disregard emotion, then you're going to lack empathy. You're going to be insincere. You're going to make robotic decisions, right? And you're going to rub people the wrong way. But if you can use the two to balance that out and take both into consideration to make a decision, and then understand how that decision is going to make somebody else react, and then deliver it in a way that you can manage that relationship, and that you can work with that person to I guess a mutual objective, right? And it's difficult, and it's a lot of trial and error, and it takes a lot of practice. But so it's just like jiu-jitsu. I mean, you just, every time you roll is a different problem, and it's something different you're going to have to navigate around. But every time you do that, you create a shortcut in your brain, and then the next time you see that, you have that recognition primed decision making available, because your brain can recognize patterns, right? And so the more you practice jiu-jitsu on the mats, the more proficient you get, the faster you're processing and decision making, the quicker you react to things or anticipate things. And the same thing in life. The more you practice managing those relationships and those emotions, the better you're going to get at it, the more proficient you'll be.
That is so good. I love that when we train, that it gives us an opportunity to be under more pressure, control.
Yeah,
okay.
Right.
But it puts us under pressure. And what I've noticed for myself is, yes, there are some of the physical benefits of it. No doubt about it. Okay. But I've noticed more the mental and emotional benefits of it, because it's hard to train for pressure. I mean, it's hard to train for how are you going to respond when the shit hits the fan? How are you going to respond when, things are going on? But when you've had those moments, when you've got a black belt on top of you and he's got his knee jammed into, legally on jiu-jitsu, into your diaphragm, okay, but you learn to relax, contract, but yet relax in that moment and go, okay, I'm not going to die here.
Right.
I'm not going to die here. And some clarity that comes, and I go, the mental benefits of it are immense. So I want to transition a little bit. I asked you to bring the hat because you wore the hat the other day.
I did.
So, to make men warriors again, is the hat that Chris has here. And by the way, you should watch our YouTube channel if you haven't checked it out, so you can see us here on the microphone. But let's talk about being a warrior and really what that means. And, it's interesting, so my background, I had spent 7 years being a teacher and a coach, taught middle school math, coach high school basketball, and a lot of other stuff as well. And then went into business. And for me, being a warrior, it didn't really compute for me. And yet now here I find myself, several decades down the road and going, man, I see unbelievable benefits of men being warriors and having that warrior spirit. And we talked a little bit off the air about, Jordan Peterson and the difference between good men and dangerous men, and how we need a world full of dangerous men that know how to, to harness their danger, really to serve people. But I know this is something you're excited, you're passionate about. So let's talk a little bit about just, being a warrior and what that means, and how some ideas how we can resurrect this warrior spirit that I believe is in all of us.
Right.
So,
no, absolutely. I think it's important, and it's lacking in society these days. But I think it's important we first start by kind of defining what we mean by warrior, right? Because the immediate tendency is to think that warrior means that somebody engaged in warfare that's that's just out to conquer and destroy, right? And that's not the case. I mean, that's part of it, right? It is being comfortable with violence is part of being a warrior. But it's also, like you said, it's keeping that reeled in and being calm and confident and in control, but always prepared to do violence on behalf of somebody else if you need to, right?
Well, and everyone would agree that to be a badass dad, you got to be able to protect.
Exactly.
You got to be able to protect your family, your kids, your wife, yourself, your money, your property. So protection is important. I mean, I don't think anyone would. I can't imagine anyone would. Well, if they're listening to this, they probably wouldn't argue with that. But who knows?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So being that warrior, so that is a part of it, but it's so much more.
Right. So I was curious about, like, what's the textbook dictionary definition of warrior?
Mm-hmm.
So I looked it up, and the first definition is a person engaged or experienced in warfare. And that's obvious, right? And that's what most people immediately go to. But more broadly, it's also defined as a person engaged in some struggle or conflict. And so you can be a warrior in everyday life. You can be a warrior in your job, and you can be a warrior in your personal life. It doesn't mean that you're engaged in warfare, right? It just means that you're managing conflict and that you're involved in some struggle, which we all are, especially if you have kids.
Yep.
You know that. And so I think it's important that you have the right mindset and the right motivation. And we talked about this a little bit earlier. There's a constant debate in the field of law enforcement, and it comes about every few years, and right now is a critical time. It's a really tough time in law enforcement. They're under a lot of criticism, and that the debate is whether officers should have a warrior mindset or a guardian mindset.
Mm-hmm.
And it used to be that the warrior mindset was very much embraced and really kind of the focal point of police training, right? There was a lot of warrior style training, they called it. And it was focused on officer survival and having that mindset to persevere and, to not give up in a fight and not, never say die. Like, you're always in the fight.
Yeah. And
like I said, back in about 2015, 2016, post Ferguson and Baltimore and all that, the debate really, really kind of heated up, and a lot of departments decided that they wanted to change the kind of the image of the department. They wanted to change that and get away from the warrior mindset and really push more of a guardian mentality, right? Kind of a less aggressive, less abrasive, but more, encourage officers to be guardians, to not see it as us versus them, as engaged in warfare, in the community, because it's really not, it's not what we should do, right? We should be guardians, but I don't think that completely going away from the term warrior is appropriate either. I think that you can be both, right? Because to me, a warrior is not just somebody engaged in warfare or conflict, but it's somebody who has a higher, a deeper moral code,
mm-hmm.
right? That lives to a certain standard, that has high expectations of themselves and others. Somebody who's very focused on physical training and mental training, right? Somebody who's always looking to improve themselves, who always is looking to be as prepared as possible for any encounter, anything that they might be called to do, right? And whether that be to come to the defense of somebody else in a violent altercation, or whether that be to protect somebody in a bad situation, but it doesn't need to have that underlying connotation of being engaged in a warfare.
Yeah. Well, you know what? Here's one of the things I've found to be interesting in my exposure. Once again, much shorter than yours, in Jiu-Jitsu, judo, martial arts, mixed martial arts, that the guys that are engaged in this are much more cerebral than I would have thought.
Yeah.
I mean, it is a much, much more cerebral sport, game, activity than I would have thought. Boxing may be the sweet science, but you could teach me in a couple hour session how to throw a decent jab, how to throw a cross, how to throw a hook. You could teach me some of those things, a little bit more. You could teach me a couple leg kicks, but to learn how to set things up in jiu-jitsu. And I just go, that exact thing in the warrior mind. I mean, it is, the warrior really has a higher level of, mental capacity than just being some meathead that's out there trying to, knock someone off the top.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think that's the key, is that you should always be, as a warrior, it's not just about the martial side of it, right? It's also about being very much of a philosopher and being a diplomat, right? It's about just carrying yourself different, being confident, but it's that silent professional, the person who isn't out looking to start anything, who isn't out advocating violence, but is fully prepared to engage in a violent encounter if they have to.
Yeah.
And that's the type of warrior that we should be promoting, is the person who's well-rounded, who is just calm and confident and professional, but is prepared for anything.
Yeah. I love that. What else you got there on the warrior side of the house?
Oh man. It's just,
so you came so prepared, man. Look at you, you got notes and everything. And
right.
I know Darius is going to be watching this and say, dude, why didn't you give me, a chance to think about some things? And so, because I just don't do that. So yeah.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about, we were talking before about, different ways of looking at blindness and some intentional blindness. And, when you get so caught up in, nowadays you hear everything from, you got to take ice baths, you got to meditate, you got to, all these things, working on your box breathing. And all wonderful activities. But some of the great parts about jiu-jitsu is you can't really be thinking about all the other crap going on in your life.
No, definitely not.
When someone's rolling with you.
So, I think that one of the biggest benefits of jiu-jitsu is that it inoculates you to stress. I think it's that repeated exposure to stressful situations and being on the verge of just wanting to panic.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
And having to,
I know that very well.
Right. Having to learn how to check that, right? Yeah. And reel it back in and get that rational brain working so you can problem solve. I think it is tremendous in just life in general and managing conflict and problems, but especially for law enforcement. And that's why I push it so hard for law enforcement officers, especially now with everything that's going on. Like you have to be working on that mental aspect of things. And resiliency is a huge topic in law enforcement, because it's not just the stress that you have in a violent encounter, but it's that residual stress you carry all the time of just being in that hypervigilant state every day that you're at work and having to kind of just be on edge. And like, you can't run around and look at everybody as a threat, but you have to have that in the back of your mind that there's a potential for it. Right. And so you're always kind of operating in this condition orange, and it's mentally taxing and it burns you out. Dr. Kevin Gilmartin has a great book out called Emotional Survival for Law Enforcement. He talks a lot about that hypervigilance roller coaster and just all of the impacts that it has in an officer's life. The strain that it can put on relationships and on social interactions, and there's such a common theme in law enforcement that when you do it for a couple years, all of a sudden you start to see like your old friends just kind of drift away. You have difficulty in maintaining relationships. You start to find yourself only hanging out with other cops, and when you're hanging out with them, you're talking about cop stuff. And you kind of just get immersed in it, and you have to break away from that, and you have to look for healthy outlets. And I think that's the biggest thing that jiu-jitsu's offered me, is a chance to interact with people from all walks of life that are not cops, and some that are first responders that understand kind of what you deal with. But you get to be around and meet so many interesting people, and so many you have so many interactions with with people that are not, they're not a threat to you. It's not, you're not going there because they're in crisis and you're having to solve their problem, and you're not dealing with them because they've committed a crime and you're having to take their freedom away. You're dealing with the regular people that you never interact with when you're at work, because when we're at work, people don't call 911 to tell us how great their day was, right? They don't call us to say, man, I got this promotion at work, I just wanted to share it with you.
Right.
Like, we don't get those calls.
Yeah.
So you find yourself dealing with a small portion of the population that's either on the wrong side of the law or is in some sort of crisis or has been victimized. Mm-hmm. And so it's very easy to get kind of this jaded perspective of thinking that that's how everybody is, and to kind of seclude yourself and only hang around other first responders or other cops because that's where you're comfortable, because you think everybody else is either in crisis or a criminal, right? And I found that jiu-jitsu offered me an opportunity to just interact with the other vast majority of the population that is just living life.
Yeah.
And I think that's healthy, and I think it's very unique to jiu-jitsu. But it also is a common interest that brings people together from so many different backgrounds and offers a lot of diversity. So I think that gives you better perspective.
Yeah.
I think that helps you make better decisions, to show more empathy, because you're interacting with a diverse group of people with a lot of different ideas and opinions and backgrounds, and I think it's healthy. But even more so than that, it's that being under pressure, like you talked about, when you're in a bad spot and you just want to panic and freak out, and learning to reel that in and to problem solve and work through that problem. And then you're doing that over and over and over again. And if we go roll for an hour and a half, and you're going to experience that a dozen times, where you're when you're in a really bad spot. And you kind of have to put that poker face on, right? Like, the better you get at jiu-jitsu, the better you are at having that poker face, that normal face, and not letting your opponent know that they're getting to you, because that's part of it too, is the psychological game. But then it's learning how to manage that stress and that panic.
But you know what, Chris, that applies to so many different, and I know you're already making this comparison, but I'm just thinking about some guys, because I've had more than a couple of guys in law enforcement, especially recently, in light of all the events here we are, middle of July 2020, and the COVID riots, all the things that are going on. They've reached out to me and said, hey, I got to get together with you. We need to talk about my finances. I need to know what my out plan is and everything. But that physical representation on the mats, learning to deal with pressure, applies to financial pressure that guys have, relational pressure, spiritual. All these different areas. And I think it goes from one place on the mats to life very, very easily. So I have just a couple of questions I want to ask you. Just as we begin to wrap up, I read this a while back. I wish I could give credit because I don't remember where I read it, but it was great and I remembered it. But the quote goes this way. It says, a bit of fragrance clings to the hand that offers a rose. Okay. Mm-hmm. Means that, hey, when you give something, a bit of that giving, you actually get a benefit from it. Okay. Well, I adapted it as I've got to know you guys over the last handful of years. And that is a bit of stench clings to the hand that deals with shit all the time. Okay. And so my question to you is this, like, when you deal with the stuff that you guys have to deal with day in and day out, and that it's the crap of society. It's people aren't calling you to give you all the good stuff, as you mentioned before. Okay. But as you're getting your hands dirty, dealing with all this, man, how do you keep yourself clean? How do you keep your heart clean? How do you not just have a dark soul?
It's tough, man, because
I know what the answer is. You take it out on white belts and blue belts and purple belts.
If you have the right outlet, okay. It's an option. No, that's such a common problem with law enforcement, and that's why you see cops get in trouble because they start finding unhealthy outlets to deal with that, right? They start drinking too much, or they end up clinically depressed, or they end up leaving the profession just because they're burnt out and they can't handle it anymore. And you have to find ways to detach, right? And my wife wanted me to bring this up, and because she noticed it, and it wasn't like I don't know that I ever like really intentionally did it. But she brought up the fact that she's very rarely seen me in uniform, because one of the ways that I detach from that is to separate work and normal life. Like I don't come and go from my house in uniform, right? Like I leave it at work, and when I go to work, a lot of times when I'm driving in or driving home, I'm listening to podcasts, I'm listening to books on tape. Like I'm trying to just work out my mind, right? And trying to hear different things and different perspectives, and I'm just clearing my head. And when I get there, I change out at the station, and I put my uniform on, and I work my shift, and then I take it off. But when I go home, and it's like when I take that uniform off, I try to leave that stuff there, And I think you have to build that mental resiliency and that ability to detach from that stuff, because otherwise it will wear you down and it will burn you out. Because man, a lot of the stuff that you see is just, it's not normal, like normal people will go their whole lives and not experience some of the stuff that we're seeing on a weekly basis or a daily basis. And so that's why I think it's easy for cops to get a jaded perspective, and it is easy for them to go down the wrong path and to end up having issues. And my department in particular has done a really good job over the past few years of developing a resiliency and wellness program where they offer incentives to work out and to get health checkups and to go to counseling. They offer free psychological services to anybody who wants it. They have a sergeant assigned to that department that does a lot of just outreach efforts to cops, and offers programs from yoga for first responders, and just always looking to get resources and information out, because in the past there's always a stigma behind that. Like you didn't ask for help, you didn't talk about it, you just push that stuff down and you bury it, and you just you don't bring it up.
It's going to come up sometime.
Yeah, and that's exactly it. It was seen as like a sign of weakness if you reached out to somebody.
Right.
And we're trying to change that culture. And my department has a peer support group. I'm a member of that. And so there's a list of officers that have gone through training with psychologists and that have volunteered to serve in a position where you make your personal cell phone number available to anybody, and they can call you anytime and reach out to you. And there's they can remain anonymous, and just ask for help.
Yeah.
And with that resiliency program, if officers are struggling and they are going down the wrong path, they can self-report and get treatment options before they end up getting a DUI or they end up getting in domestic violence or something bad happens to where now they've gone too far and there's no saving their job.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And so we want people to get that help before they've done irreparable damage in their personal and professional life. But again, it comes back to that self-assessment and that self-management. Like you have to constantly work on that.
Well, Chris, man, we could go on and on and on. I've got two last things that I want to do. One, I want to give you, give a good report. Okay. So this will be something fun, because you guys don't really get to see the rest of the story, and all the tough times that you guys deal with. And I would imagine, going into a scenario, where, especially when kids are involved and then removing kids from the home. I mean, just how hard that is. But that's the last you guys really see of it. Well, let's see, it'll be I got to make sure I get this right. Yeah. 9 years ago tomorrow will be the day that I actually met Jacob for the first time. So
wow.
Gretchen was in Michigan. So, he was 4 years old when Jacob and I met, and it's kind of a crazy situation. Gretchen's dad was sick. And so she was in Michigan. And so, here we were, we'd been 14 years married, no kids, and hoping, praying, begging for kids, and decided we were going to adopt. And the moment when it looks like it's going to happen, she's out of town. Okay. And so both of our boys came through the foster care system, horrific stories, before that, but now you look at them, 9 years later, two of the greatest kids ever, absolutely love them to death. My little guy, Bentley, just a fireball, red hair, blue eyes, and just loves to get after it. Just learned to do a backflip when we were in Texas last week. So he's doing that all the time now.
He's psyched about that.
Yeah, he is. But I want to give you guys the rest of the story going, listen, you have to deal with society and people, in sometimes their worst possible states where they are. And that's where your part of the story feels like it ends. But I want you to know the story does continue on, and no, not all of them turn out to be wonderful. And statistically, kids that would come from the background that my boys come from, they would turn out to, follow a pattern that has been set for them before, but they're amazing. They're doing great. They are contributors. They're leaders in their communities, on their football teams, and, different areas. And that doesn't happen unless men and women in uniform don't stand up and protect those kids when they couldn't protect themselves. And so because of what you guys did, we get to have this great relationship with these two boys, which is absolutely amazing. So I want to let you know kind of the rest of the story on that. And just thank you. Thank you for your service. Thank you for your time. Thank you for, spending countless hours with me on the mats, and we've talked off the mats as well. And it's just amazing to me that the benefits and all the things that come from jiu-jitsu and life in the world, experiences we miss because we judge someone by the things that they wear, the uniform they wear, the position that they have, and we miss out on the real human being. And so I want to thank you for all that you've done and continue to do, and for all of our, first responders that are out there, emergency responders, and just how you love and you do care for us and you protect us, many times even from ourselves as well. So thank you for that. Chris, you have any last things you want to share before we sign off?
No, I just wanted to add that, well, first of all, thank you for that. It's very much appreciated, especially right now. But the topic today of Make Men Warriors again, I just wanted to add that all the dads out there can embrace that warrior mentality too. And what I mean by that is live by a moral code, instill values in your kids, be a tough guy and a gentleman. Constantly seek improvement. Just always be looking to exercise your mind and your body, and to always be better than you were yesterday.
Yeah.
And the other thing is such a big thing in jiu-jitsu, and that I think is so important for warriors to have is that humility, right? Mm-hmm. And to teach your kids humility in success and in setbacks.
Yeah. Well, I would be greatly remiss if I didn't mention, obviously, you're wearing your Origin shirt today and always rocking your Origin gear. So I was going to say, when you're not in uniform, you're in Origin all the time.
I'm kind of an unofficial rep for them, yeah.
Yeah, but especially with this warrior mentality, Jocko's book, The Warrior Kid. I read it with both my boys, and absolutely love it. So a little plug, go out there, go to Amazon, wherever you get it. Get Jocko Willink, his book, A Warrior Kid, is great. So if the dad's out there, he's like, I don't really know what to do. Want to teach resilience to my son, my daughter. What a great, stepping off point is really right there. And I'll tell you, when I read through it, there was a lot of stuff that I was like, damn, I need to do this myself. I need to go through this experience myself. But I
think parents read it more than they want to tell people.
Yeah. Well, hey guys, we're going to wrap up here, but very excited. So it is now official. It is out. It is uploaded. It is ready to rock and roll. Our new website, we were able to finally secure it, but it is BadAssDads.org. no abbreviations, nothing else, just BadAssDads.org. You can get all this stuff. Check out our YouTube channel. I really want to get that going, and we're going to really want to grow our distribution as well for all of this for people. We are a band of brothers that are committed to forging stronger fathers, and we're doing what we can to get strong fathers in here just to share their message. So, Chris, once again, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Have a badass day and be a badass dad, and we are out. Hey guys, I want to thank you guys again just for listening to this episode of Badass Dads. Hey, if you found this episode helpful, if it's beneficial, if it's shareable, man, we'd love for you to pass it on to someone. Previous episodes you can check out on our podcast page, on iTunes, on Stitcher, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Also, check out our website, BadAssDads.org. That's BadAssDads.org. You can find us on Facebook and Instagram pages. So please, love the support. Check all that out. Let's get this movement going. And we are committed to forging stronger fathers. Be a part of the movement. We're out.